what's the difference between self-care, self-indulge? Well, you have to start with the fact that you are a bundle of appetites, and within your appetites, you have opportunities for fulfillment, for pleasure, and to have needs met. So if you're doing something like, if you don't get your needs met, you're gonna burn out. So it's not selfless to just never think about your needs and to never have your needs met and to just give out. That is a recipe for disaster. I was talking to a friend recently who's in a dating relationship, and he's concerned because he's trying to figure out, should we go to the next level? And his biggest concern is that there seems to be in their relationship, at least through his perspective, a lack of reciprocity. She's not reciprocating. So he's going, man, I feel like I'm giving, it's not coming back. He's like, and I want to be a team player, and I don't want to keep score and go, but I did 6 and you only did 3, and when are you going to get on my level? You don't want to do that. That's death. But at the same time, the ecosystem's circular. The water goes up, evaporates, comes out. We got to keep replenishing energy. So if all you do is give out, your biology's trained for that, right? You go run a marathon, and what's going on in your biology and your brain is like, how long are we going to do this? So your brain's going, how long are you gonna do this? Because we're burning calories right now, and we only have so many. And if you don't start putting that gel stuff in your mouth, or you don't stop and get a drink and do this, your body's going, hold on to these calories, because we know God made it so awesome, your body's so awesome, that if you burn up calories and you don't replenish, you're gonna die. So it's gonna hold on to calories. It's gonna hold on to energy to try to survive. And so my friend was sort of doing that emotionally. He's like, if I just keep doing this, I'm gonna run out of calories and be dead on the side of the road. Is this gonna work? Self-care is about making sure that your needs are met. It's okay to have your emotional needs, your physical needs, your spiritual needs, have these things met. But at some point, I can't tell you where's that line. You gotta sit in that tension. You gotta think about that, and you gotta pray about that, and you've gotta evaluate that. Because within our appetites, God has made our appetites to, in many ways, bring us some of the greatest fulfillment that we have. Let's run through a few of them real quick. First appetite comes to mind, food. Food's great. Food's great. Food gives you an acute sense of being full. It's a good feeling. You eat, you get full, you're like, I feel good. You know that? Like, that's good. God made it that way. Also, God gave you taste buds. What an idea. It was brilliant. Good job, God. Taste buds, like he wants you to taste that food, like, oh, that's good. And to feel full. Of course, we know there's a line. So you're about to mess it up at Thanksgiving. You're gonna overdo it. You sit there like, oh, it's like miserable, right? But this is how appetites work. You go to sleep, you wake up, and you're like, oh, let's go back in, let's go back in. Why? Because it's fulfilled for a minute, but it's never fully and finally satisfied. It's gonna need some more pretty soon. So you gotta know that, because you don't wanna overdo it, but then you don't wanna underdo it either, because that's no good when you give your money to Panera and they give you a half sandwich. And like soup's gone, and you're like, okay, can I have a refill on this whole meal? No shade, Panera, don't go suing your boy. All right, it's a great place to be, okay? We love Panera here. Dude, I'm seriously gonna get email for that. I'm really sorry. Panera, I apologize. What was I talking about? Food, appetites. There's some good to it, but as well as I do, you don't respect that appetite, you don't feed it right, it can get massive. And then you gotta do more just to feel normal, and it gets out of control, and it can dominate your life. Create impulsive behaviors. You can't stop thinking about it. And you have no self-control around it. Keep going down the line. Sex would be another one. Created by God, climactic experience, designed around intimacy and unity. And when it's done God's way, it's done in moderation in the right way in a fully committed marriage. Till death do us part. So even when I find out the not so good things about you, I'm not gonna leave you. And so I do it. It's safety, it's pleasure, it's beautiful, it's brought to, okay? God's created that way. And then that appetite's replenished. And so you've never had an orgasm so good that you're like, I never need another one. You just pretty soon it's like, hey, let's try that again. God made it just, you keep having this experience, and it's part of procreation. It's just a really cool thing. But if you introduce unhealthy things in there, that appetite can rob you. I'm talking about jack you up bad. Your entire life revolves around it. It can create so much pain, so much dysfunction, so much captivity. It's an appetite. It can be great or it can be terrible. Let's keep going. Power. Power's not bad. Power's good. It's good to be able to pay for some stuff. It's good to be able to accomplish some stuff. It's good to be able to fix some stuff. It's good to be able to go in and to use your power for good. Like that, being powerful is a good feeling. That's not a bad feeling. But if it gets out of control, if that appetite takes over, if it's unhealthy, power can rob from you. It's just never enough. I got to have more power, more power. It dominates every single thing you do. Another one, success. Success is good. Success is so good. Succeeding, you get the team together, everybody's got their role and their job, and we have our key performance indicators, and we have our goal and our deadline and our budget, and we got it done, and we got it on time, under budget. Come on, baby. We did it. We hit the goal. We're high five. That's a good feeling, man. Enjoy it. You're supposed to enjoy it. You did good work with good people, and we did our job, and we got it done. Praise the Lord. That's pleasurable. That's fun. That's fulfilling. You're supposed to feel that fulfillment. Of course, the success appetite, if it gets out of control, can absolutely rob you blind, because there's never enough success. In fact, you can't even enjoy the deal you made because you always need another deal. They're never big enough. It's never enough. It's a monster in your life if it's not put in the right context. Attention is an appetite. Attention, a need for attention is not completely superficial. I was sharing this with this message. My wife and I were talking about it, and she sent me an article of about an orphanage about 100 years ago. I believe it was in England, if I'm not mistaken, where they had this orphanage, and they had a bunch of orphan babies, and what they were doing is they were meeting their physical needs. So they were making sure they were fed, making sure they were clothed, but at that time, because of bacteria, they wanted to make sure they didn't get them sick, so they wore masks, and they would barely touch the babies. And they also didn't want to bond with them because they didn't want the baby to bond with a nurse, and then once they go to the adopted family, now they got to unbond. So they neglected those emotional needs, and they're thinking, well, it's just an infant. We just got to keep them alive until we get them adopted. And the baby started dying, literally dying, from unmet needs of attention, connection, and affection. Dying. Their brains were shriveling down. Their brains started just shutting down and shutting off. And at 100%, they were dying. And so God has made you actually to need some affection and some attention and some affirmation and some connection. That's not bad. That's not bad. But if that appetite is in an unhealthy zone, what ends up happening is I need attention so bad. I just can't get enough attention. So I just can't get enough. Whatever I do, I got to be recognized. I've got to be seen. And I need more, and I need more, and I need more, and I need more. And so your entire life is this compulsion for attention. It's an appetite. Greg, what does this have to do with listening to myself? It has everything to do with listening to yourself, because here's the deal. You got voices going on inside your head. You are a bundle of appetites. Paul says, even though the truest, deepest thing about you is truly righteous and holy, you still have to contend with flesh. And your flesh is a bundle of appetites that can either be really fulfilling in moderation or can get so big that they dominate your life. And when they get big, they get loud. And if the appetites and flesh get loud enough, I can't even hear myself think. I can't even hear myself think. My brain is so noisy. I feel these compulsions. And by the way, when my appetites and your appetites get bigger than they should, because I introduce, whether it's sin or in some way unhealth, or maybe there was trauma that you didn't ask for, but in some way there is an unhealthy thing going on. Those appetites get big, they steal your voice and start talking to you in your voice. And by the way, when they get big enough, you're the easiest sell ever. Yeah. You are so easy to sell. Why? Because I'm compelled. It's a compulsion. I want it so bad. I need it. Because now I don't know the difference between indulgence and need. Because what I think is a need is an overblown appetite. And now I need more and more and more just to feel normal. And when the buzz wears off, I feel weird. And so I got to feed. And I'm confused about my own needs. Paul talks about this, same dude that talked about the other stuff, talks about this. He says in Romans 8, 5, and 6, those who live according to the flesh, okay, flesh, bundle of appetites, flesh, my flesh, he said they have their minds on what the flesh desires. Those fleshly desires, what they perceive to be needs. But the needs have gotten so big. He said that's what you think about all the time. He said those who live in accordance with the Spirit have their mind set on what the Spirit desires. The mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. He said, I say in Galatians 5, 16 through 19, he says, I say walk by the Spirit and you'll not gratify the desires of your flesh. Another way to say that in verse 16 is, if you keep feeding and overfeeding and introducing unhealthy appetite, if that appetite gets too big, it will make you think that an overindulged appetite is actually just a need. Because it needs so much to maintain and it's trying to get bigger. So he said, man, if you fall into that, it will ultimately lead to death. He said, but if you walk by the Spirit, you'll keep those fleshly appetites and your flesh in check. For the flesh desires what's contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit contrary to the flesh, and they're in conflict with each other so that you're not to do whatever you want. In the NLT it says, if you let the flesh and the Spirit, right, the deepest, truest part of you is in conflict with your flesh and your appetites. He said, and if you let the one get louder, you won't be free to carry out your good intentions, it says in the NLT. So in other words, the deepest part of you has really good intentions. If you aren't wise and sober and disciplined around your flesh, it will be so loud you won't be able to hear that. But if you're led by the Spirit, you're not under the law. The acts of the flesh are obvious, and then he goes into talking about appetites. So if you overindulge or introduce sin to your flesh, it gets so big it drowns out the real you. What's the answer? Have you ever been in a noisy environment and you think you heard something? And you're with some folks, and you're like, did you hear that? Like, no, I didn't hear anything. You swear you heard something. What do you do when that happens? You start really listening. And you hear it again. Did you hear that? Have you ever had people 2 times not hear it? And you're like, come on, guys. And then you start thinking, am I crazy? Like, I might be crazy. Like, I don't hear it. And you're like, no, listen, guys. This is instinctive. You start getting everybody listen now. Did you hear that? And they're like, yeah, we heard it. Now, what would you do if there was noise in the room? You're trying to hear this. What would you say? Hey, turn down the TV. Turn down the TV. Turn down the noise. Turn that down. Turn that down. And by the way, if you can barely hear it over the noise, if you turn the noise down, sometimes it gets really obvious. No one can deny it. There it is. It's right there. And so often, when we're trying to hear the right voice, if I have noise around appetites that have gotten big and loud we just talked about a few. There's more, okay? Yeah, Lord, but what? I'm just trying to give you something to pray about, the Lord to speak to you about, because yours might not fall in these categories. But let's just say I had something about attention or success or power or sex or food or whatever. Those appetites being so loud, I got to turn that down so that I can hear. This is where we talk about discipline being a part of my freedom, because think of something like fasting. Fasting has a lot of purposes attached to it, but one of the purposes of fasting is you would introduce that in an appetite that you really are having a hard time controlling, and your lack of control, it's getting loud and it's over talking. In your mind, it's too loud. So even by taking that and bringing it back, by saying no and not indulging there, you're bringing that appetite, the volume down, and now the Spirit that's been trying to get a word in edgewise, you turn the TV down, all of a sudden now I can hear it clear as day, what God's trying to say to me, okay? We don't fast because God's like, my favorite kids are the ones who fast, They're like my favorite ones. This isn't that. I'm doing this, I want to hear God's voice better, and I got too much noise in my head. So what are you gonna fast? Good question. Which appetite is out of control? Which one, if you be honest, let the Holy Spirit bring revelation to your mind right now. Which one has become a compulsion? Which one can you not let go of? Which one? Okay, I read this article the other day. It says the average person touches their cell phone 2,000 times a day. I'm right there with you. I mean, honestly, I'm like, what's it? Okay. I mean, we can't be bored for 2 seconds. We're like, compulsion. You know, honestly, and I'm not trying to get weird, but it might be interesting if you shut that mug off for about 2 weeks. You might find you feel a lot less, that starts to get under control. You start to cut things off. So I'm not here to go get all legalistic. Everybody shows up next week, nobody's got a smartphone. You know, it's like, I ain't going to that church, you know, I'll tell you what. I'm not trying to get legalistic with you. What I'm trying to do is give you a place to look. Lord, show me, what's the thing that's out of control? I'm on this too much. There's a place in scripture where Paul's talking, and he actually talks about food, and he's talking about it literally, but a bit metaphorically, because he says this, he says, don't be mastered by anything. And then he said, well, you say, well, food is made for the stomach and the stomach for food, and God will destroy both. Basically what he's saying is, they're saying, well, it's just food, who cares, it's no big deal, it's just food. And he's like, but no, don't be mastered by anything. And then he starts to talk about other things. And so you just look at, like, it might be something around attention, power, success, sex, food, something, I don't know. Maybe it's something totally different. Let the Lord speak to you and to go in there. Paul says this later on around that same conversation, 1 Corinthians 9:27, he said, I discipline my body like an athlete, training it to do what it should. Otherwise, I fear that after preaching to others, I myself might be disqualified. In a different translation, he said, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, he says. I strike a blow to my body because Paul knew that the flesh is no joke. You got to be sober about your flesh, and you got to know where your weaknesses are, and you got to know where you're prone to an appetite that overindulged will have needs that dominate your life. And he said, here's the sad thing that could happen. He was sober about the fact that he said, this could happen. I could, in helping everybody else, have a blind spot of something that creeps up on me and dominates my life, and so I have no freedom, and I can't tell the difference of the voices. And so he said, what do? He said, I take my training, my body, my appetites, I take them as seriously as an athlete would, because I want to have them under control.